Shreyas, do the recording and
Yes.
the YouTube.
Yes. Starting.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of the trustees of Lotus and Chrysanthemum Trust and myself, the managing trustee, Dr. Geeta U. Badikilaya. This is the fourth online talk in our monthly series of webinars. And today we have the very engaging retired ambassador, Pascal Alain Nazareth, who will be sharing his thoughts on the entry, evolution, and flowering of Buddhism in Japan. In his 35-year career as a diplomat, retired Ambassador PA Nazareth has served in India's diplomatic missions in Tokyo, Rangoon, Lima, London, New York, and as Director General of ICCR and India's High Commissioner to Ghana and as Ambassador to Egypt and Mexico. He transformed Indian Council for Cultural Relations, ICCR, into a dynamic organization and gave a new cultural dimension to Indian diplomacy. Since retirement in 1994, he has lectured at the universities of Bengaluru, Banaras, Delhi, Stanford, Yale, Columbia, Heidelberg, Uppsala, and Peking. His literary pursuits of Gandhi's outstanding leadership book has been translated into Indian and foreign languages such as Arabic, French, Mandarin, Russian, and Spanish. Former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev has written the foreword for 12 of his foreign editions. In 2007, Ambassador Nazareth was presented the prestigious Youth Hunt Award for his lifetime of world service. The previous recipients were Pope John Paul II, Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, Mikhail Gorbachev, Nelson Mandela, and Desmond Tutu. He had delivered keynote addresses at the UN in 2012 and the UN Library in Geneva in 2017. His Gandhi, the Soul Force Warrior, published in 2018, has also come out in many foreign editions. His Ringside Seat to History, published in 2020, is a highly acclaimed memoir with a difference, and his power of recall is amazing. His is a very interesting life and voice, distinguished by its dedication to India's civilizational values and humanitarian precepts. From a small town youth to witnessing historic events at close proximity in his diplomatic postings, his post-retirement years have been dedicated to reviving Gandhian ideals. The entry, firm establishment, and flowering of Buddhism in China and subsequently in Korea and Japan are its most impressive achievements and its emergence as one of the world's major religions. By 700 CE, there were 545 monasteries and shrines in different parts of Yamato, as Japan was then known. During this century, Buddhism brought about a radical reorientation in Japanese concepts of governance, religious practices, social ethics, temple architecture, and sculpture in Japan. In subsequent centuries, a similar transformation took place in all other aspects of life, including calligraphy, painting, poetry, the decorative arts, as also Buddhism itself, which now acquired a distinctive Japanese characteristics. So a warm welcome to you, Ambassador Nazareth-san, and the stage is all yours. And we welcome you once again as our speaker in this fourth monthly webinar series. So over to you, Nazareth-san.
Thank you, Dr. Geeta Badikilaya. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Thank you to you, and many thanks to all the distinguished people and dear friends who have joined this webinar this evening. I'm greatly honored to speak at it. The entry, evolution, and flowering of Buddhism in China and subsequently in Korea, Japan, and Mongolia are the most impressive achievements and the main reason for its achievement as one of the major religions of the world. However, the fact that it emerged as one of the major religions of the world is due to three rather extraordinary episodes. Number one was that in 323 BC, Alexander the Great, he is called, first invaded and overthrew Persia, and then he arrived at the banks of the Indus. This was the first time that there was direct contact between Greece and India. And in fact, as a result of this invasion, direct trade routes were established for the first time, both by land and by sea, between India and Greece. The next thing that happened was just 60 years later, another ambitious Indian prince set out to conquer a province in eastern India, Kalinga. Our king Ashoka, who later in fact became emperor. It was such a bloody war that he decided to give up war and to convert to Buddhism. This was in 263 BC. Now, having been converted to Buddhism, he decided to send missionaries to spread the message of the Buddha all over the world. It was easy to send missionaries in a southward direction to Sri Lanka, where he sent his own son. Later, he sent his daughter with a sapling of the bo tree to Sri Lanka. He also sent 2 missionaries to Burma, from where they spread the message through eastern India. But it was not at all easy to send them up north because of the high mountains, the Himalayas. Beyond that, there were the Parmis, and then there was the big Taklamakan desert. Now, just at this time, a king in China, Qin Shi Huang, was able to subjugate all the other smaller kingdoms and to unify China. This was about the year 220 BC. Now, for the first time, China was able to extend its government and its governance right up to its western end, that is, right up to the tip of the Taklamakan desert. Now, at this time, China had something important to offer to the world, that was silk. So, shortly after this emperor had unified China, the Silk Route was established about the year 150 BC. Now, that became an important route not only for the movement of silk, but also for spirituality in the form of Buddhism. So it was along this path that Buddhism, for the first time, entered into China from Central America, from Kashgar and Khotan, where monasteries had already been set up earlier. Now, the first, according to Chinese chronicles, the Kashyapa, Matanga, and Dharmaraksha were the first Buddhist monasteries to come to China from Khotan early in the 1st century AD. They are said to have been warmly welcomed by the Chinese and installed in the White Horse Monastery at Luoyang. Yeah, this is the temple, the first Buddhist temple in China. Now, a remarkable thing about Buddhism in China is the following: that whereas Buddhism was harbinger of culture and civilization in Central Asia and in Southeast Asia, China was a notable exception. By the time Buddhism entered China in the 1st century AD, it already was an old civilization with time-honored, hallowed traditions. Buddhism therefore had to compete with the well-established indigenous philosophical and religious systems of Confucianism and Taoism. that he managed to do this and established itself firmly as what came to be called one of the three doctrines is the most major achievement and triumph of Buddhism in any country in the world. Now, from China, Buddhism went to Korea about the year 350 AD. At that time, there were three kingdoms in Korea: Kaguryo, Pekshe, and Silla. In AD 372, Kaguryo proclaimed Buddhism as its state religion. Pekshe did likewise in 384 and Silla in 528.
जितनी गर्मी है अभी तक तो मस्त गर्मी के अंदर.
Now, Buddhism came to Japan from the Pekshe kingdom. When came to Japan when the Pekshe kingdom sent a group of Buddhist monks in 522 AD, along with a bronze Buddha statue, sacred scriptures, and timekeeping devices. Initially only slowly accepted by the people, it nonetheless found acceptance within the imperial court. By the time Prince Shotoku, son of the deceased Emperor Yomei, had become an ardent Buddhist. When he was appointed as regent to Empress Suiko, the first of 8 female regent empresses of Japan, and also the first of them to have embraced Buddhism in 539. A few months thereafter, that is a few months after he was appointed as regent, he secured her approval to proclaim Buddhism as Japan's state religion. In doing so, a 17-article code with a simple set of injunctions for good governance based on Chinese practice was incorporated. But incorporating the extension of the call to revere the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, was issued. These are referred to as the Flourishing Three Treasures Edict of 549 AD. Prince Shotoku is therefore revered as the father of Japanese Buddhism. Now, if you notice here, in making this the state religion, they have already, made this the basis not only just of governance, but also of social ethics. By the early 17th century, not only the imperial court, but also many nobles had become Buddhists and patrons of this new religion. The imposing Horyuji temple at Nara, with its pagoda and surrounding cloisters, was built in 607 and 608 AD. In 623, Prince Shotoku's wife commissioned a Korean sculptor to fashion the now renowned bronze trinity of the Buddha, flanked by 2 bodhisattvas, seated in front of a screen and with a halo around his neck, which was finished and installed in the Horyuji temple. Now, Emperor Shomu, who reigned from 734 to 750 AD, publicly declared himself a servant of the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. In keeping with this, he established Buddhist temples, monasteries, and nunneries in all the provincial towns and had the magnificent Todaiji temple built at Nara. He also ordered the casting. Incidentally, the picture here up here with all the flags showing was taken on a very amazing and imposing institution. This was to celebrate the death, the 1250th death anniversary of the first head priest of the Todaiji temple. Now, this is an amazing temple. It is the largest, the oldest and largest wooden temple in the world. And right through from the time it was built, it has been painstakingly maintained in the same condition. And it's the most revered institution of all the Buddhist temples in Japan. He also ordered the casting and installation of an enormous 50-foot high gold-covered Vairosana Buddha temple. The Vairosana Buddha is the cosmic Buddha, not the historic Buddha, as an earthly symbol of the Buddha's heavenly tranquility. The sculptor Kimimaro is said to have used 437 tons of bronze, 288 pounds of gold, 165 pounds of mercury, and 7 tons of vegetable wax for this purpose. This mega statue was completed and installed in the Todaiji temple, which serves as the head of the Kegon school, one of the 4 important schools of Buddhism in Japan. So this mega statue was installed in 749 AD. The following year, in a formal public ceremony at the Todaiji temple, at which the empress and all the nobles of the imperial court were present, Emperor Shomu abdicated the throne, took the tonsure, and joined a Buddhist monastery. His empress took holy vows and joined a Buddhist nunnery. All this is proof of the extraordinary impact of Buddhism on the Japanese royal family, and through the royal family, on the rest of the country. Under the Ritsuryo system of government which Emperor Shomu had established, Buddhist temples and schools were regulated by the state through the Sogo, which means Office of Priestly Affairs. Todaiji was the central administrative temple for all the provincial temples, as also for the 4 Buddhist schools in Japan at that time. Letters dating from this time also show that all the 4 Buddhist schools had offices at the Todaiji, complete with administrators, shrines, and their own library. In other words, it had become like a papacy for Buddhism in Japan. Now, Emperor Shomu's daughter, who succeeded him as Empress Koken, reigned from 749 until 770, with a 10-year from 749 until 770. She also was an ardent Buddhist and very devoted to a Buddhist monk named Dokyo, on whom she bestowed many favors. Towards the end of her reign, she wished to name him as her successor. However, the nobles of the court intervened and prevented this, thus saving Japan from becoming a Buddhist theocracy. 4 important schools of Buddhist philosophy which sprouted and gestated in Japan were the Tendai, Kegon, Shingon, and Jodo schools. They were founded during the Nara and subsequent Heian period. The first one was 710 to 770. The latter was 790 to 1185. During the Heian period, the capital was shifted from Nara to Kyoto, and monasteries became centers of power, some of them even establishing armies of Sohei, which are warrior monks. The monk Saicho founded the Tendai school at Mount Hei near Kyoto. This school, based on the Lotus Sutra, became, along with Zen, the largest and most enduring school of Japanese Buddhism. It prescribed intense training and strict discipline for its monks, as also firm loyalty to Dai Nippon, Great Japan. The name Kegon is a translation of the Sanskrit Avatamsaka or Garland Sutra. The Kegon school holds that the universe is self-creating and is a harmonious whole with all elements and living creatures therein being interrelated and interdependent. With the Buddha Vairosana, that's the cosmic Buddha, at its center, permitting everything. The great impact and present-day pertinence of the Kegon doctrine has been written about by Fritjof Capra in his Tao of Physics book. He states, the culmination of Buddhist thought has been reached, according to many authors, in the so-called Avatamsaka school, which is based on the sutra of the same name and is one of the greatest scriptures produced by the Indian religious genius. The central theme of the sutra is the unity and interrelation of all things and events, a conception which is not only the very essence of the Eastern worldview, but also one of the basic elements in the world view emerging from modern physics. What does this mean? It is actually related to the Advaita philosophy of Shankara. And what does this particular philosophy say in essence? That all of creation is a manifestation of the cosmic spirit. That God is not an old man with a beard sitting up in the sky like a lot of Christian art showed him. He is actually the supreme energy which pervades the whole universe. Everything that you see, whether it is a star that shines, a bird that sings, a child that is conceived, or a flower that blooms, it is all a manifestation of the same energy. In fact, in our own case, the beating of your heart, the fact that you take your breath, that you live every moment, all depends on this cosmic energy, which the moment it is withdrawn, you are as dead as a doornail. And I would also like to explain here that until the beginning of the last century, 20th century, it was believed that the building blocks of this universe was the atom. That was the smallest particle, in creation. Everything else was built on the atom. Now, Einstein, for the first time, pointed out that even the atom can be split, can be broken. And inside that atom is not more matter, but it is energy. So the fundamental building block of this universe is energy and not matter. And this is what this particular thing relates to. And that is why Fritjof Capra has referred to it as the worldview emerging from modern physics. Now, the Shingon, or the Mantrayana school, was founded by Kukai, a Nara nobleman who took to religion and blossomed as this multifaceted genius with a great talent for preaching, calligraphy, painting, and poetry. He had gone to China in 840 AD and studied with his renowned Mantrayana master, Hui Kuo, who initiated him into the school's esoteric doctrines and practices, which holds that by recitation of mantras, contemplation of mandalas, and use of ritual gestures, mudras, enlightenment is achieved. Kukai stressed the importance of Sanskrit mantras being recited accurately, as mantras in the original language are exceedingly potent, each word possessing a profound meaning which is changed when the sound is altered. So there was also a great emphasis on studying Sanskrit and studying it as professionally and perfectly as possible. Now, Honen is the founder of the Jodo school. He held that since enlightenment was difficult and improbable for ordinary people through their own efforts, Nembutsu, that is the constant repetition of Amida's name, was the path for them to reach Jodo. Jodo, which means the pure land, or what we would call in modern parlance, paradise. This is essentially a devotional approach to religion and became popular among the common folk, particularly among the common folk. Zen was founded by the monk Esai, who brought it from China in 1191. He brought it to Japan along with tea. The latter he considered the secret of long life. He initially set up his then school in Kyoto. However, as Tendai and Shingon were already established here among the elite, Zen was frowned upon as a newfangled Chinese idea. He therefore moved his school to Kamakura, where it was welcome. Here, the shoguns and the samurai found Zen useful as an effective way to heighten concentration and martial skills, as it cultivated fearlessness and almost superhuman precision by getting practitioners to empty themselves of all ego and act in a nothingness frame of mind, even in the face of death. Besides, it invigorated the samurai ethic of Spartan asceticism and filial loyalty. It was ironic that the Buddha's specific teaching became at Kamakura the means for hereditary warriors to achieve military perfection. The Indian martial art of Kalaripayat, known in China as Kung Fu and in Japan as Judo, also became popular with samurai families. After Esai's death, his disciples Hokuin and Dogen carried forward the Zen tradition, but with separate schools. The former evolved the Rinzai, or cow, provocative argument. In other words, it was the Socratic technique of the dialectic, where the teacher makes a proposition, the student then is supposed to counter it. And by, in that fashion, they carry forward the argument and finally arrive at the truth. Now, the latter school, the latter school was called the Soto, or gradual enlightenment method, which used simple meditation. It was called Shikantaza, that is sitting quietly in contemplation, like the historical Buddha, like the historical Buddha. Just cut it off. Among the rules Dogen laid down for meditation were to sit in a lotus position with upright back, with open but lowered eyes, with breath well regulated, and thinking of non-thinking and thinking beyond thinking. Though Satori enlightenment was the ultimate objective, Dogen wanted his disciples to focus their minds on achieving perfection in every routine task. Therefore, even humdrum manual work like scrubbing the floor or just cleaning the leaves in the garden, it becomes a form of meditation. Amazingly, though all forms of Zen emphasized extreme asceticism, they generated a vast outpouring of artistic creativity with painting, sculpture, ceramics, calligraphy, haiku poetry, no and kabuki drama, flower arrangement, gravel gardening, and the tea ceremony. In all this creativity, the basic approach was that form is emptiness and emptiness form. The gravel garden in the Kyoto Tenryuji temple, where the monks regularly rake the gravel to suggest with artful simplicity gravel that looks like ripples on water, matter like non-matter, permanence as impermanence, time as eternity, relative truth as absolute truth. It's a classic example of Zen artistic creativity. This is a beautiful representation of this. The mammoth Buddha statue, the Daibatsu, was commissioned and installed by the shogunate at Kamakura in 1252. Its sculptor was Ono Goreemon. Zen calligraphy was originated by the monk Ikkyu, 1394 to 1481, at Tenryuji Monastery, with brushstrokes that were spontaneous, limited, rugged, and deceptively casual. This art form was perfected subsequently, and its calligraphy scrolls used as objects of contemplation and for inducing feelings of tranquility. Zen painting and poetry, haiku, a 17-syllable mini poem, show the same qualities of restraint, simplicity, yet infused with a sublime quality, instance of thought, yet embodying wholeness of perfection. A classic example of haiku poetry is Matsuo Basho's mini poem. An old pond and a frog jumps in, the splash of water. The ritual serving of tea, initially prepared by Zen monks evolved into an exquisite Japanese tea, into the exquisite Japanese tea ceremony, requiring great concentration, precision in every action, and specially designed ceramics. Japanese ikebana also developed out of the flower arrangements made in Zen monasteries and the rules laid out for them. It was also during the Kamakura period that the Jodo Pure Land schools of Buddhism became the largest Buddhist sect in Japan, and the influential monk Nichiren reinterpreted the Lotus Sutra and thus gestated the school of Nichiren Buddhism, which presently is widely known within Japan and worldwide through the Soka Gakkai. Now, the historian Will Durant has epitomized the evolution of Japanese art in China thus: Buddhism stimulated art in Japan as it had done in China. The Zen practice of meditation lent itself to brooding creativeness in color and form, almost as readily as in philosophy and poetry, and visions of the Amida Buddha became as frequent in Japanese art as annunciations and confusions and crucifixions on the walls and canvases of the Renaissance. The priest Yeishan Sozu was the Fra Angelico and El Greco of his age, whose designs and descendings of Amida made him the greatest religious painter in the history of Japan. Will Durant has written this in volume 1 of his classic, The Story of Civilization. This is an amazing picture of a samurai who's meditating under a cherry tree in Japan. Now, the golden age, in a way, of for Japan, Japanese Buddhism, and all the art it created, was the shogunate period, which lasted from, I think, from about 1603 to 1868. Now, it was also ironic that while all this great creativity was taking place, Japan had closed itself out to the world, because the shogunate was afraid that if the foreigners come to Japan, they will come as traders, but ultimately they will interfere with the country's internal affairs and take over the country. They had seen this happen in India. They had seen this happen in the Philippines. So they therefore decided to close the country in, and this was done with an edict. The edict, it was called Sakoku, and there was the Sakoku Edict of 1635. It banned Christianity, Portuguese ships visiting Japanese ports, and Japanese people traveling abroad. Now, this was all fine as it lasted, but it suddenly got blown apart when on July 8, 1853, American Commodore Matthew Perry of the American Navy led his 4 ships into Tokyo Bay and bombarded the harbor. He was demanding the reestablishment of international trade with Japan. Now, the Japanese samurai and the shogunate warriors had perfected the art of swordsmanship, but they had not thought of or been advised to modernize their weapons. Now, all of a sudden, they found they were completely defenseless against cannon. You can't use the swords against cannon. So the shogunate collapsed all of a sudden. Now, the imperial household, which had been sidelined for almost 250 years while the shogunate ruled, now suddenly, took advantage. And they and the nobles of the court brought about the Meiji Restoration. That, in a way, turned out to be the death knell for Buddhism. Because what happened now, with the Meiji Restoration, the new government adopted a strong anti-Buddhist attitude because of the shogunate's close connections with Buddhism in the previous 2 centuries. During this period, Japan abandoned its feudal system and opened up to the West, particularly to British influences. Shintoism became the state religion. The Edict of April 1872 ended the status of the Buddhist precepts as state law and allowed monks to marry and to eat meat. Buddhist temples and schools had a simple choice: adopt or perish. During World War II, most Buddhist temples supported the government. Only the Nichiren Buddhist school affiliate, the Soka Gakkai, refused to do so or obey the laws pertaining to religious organizations and their schools. Sunesaburo Makiguchi and Josei Toda, who ran the Soka Gakkai schools, were imprisoned and their organization disbanded. Makiguchi died in prison, but Toda survived and revived the Soka Gakkai after the war. In post-World War II Japan, traditional Buddhism was largely reduced to become what came to be described as funerary Buddhism, wherein temples and monks were utilized only for funeral rites and not to provide spiritual sustenance or guidance to the people. However, the modern form of Nichiren Buddhism, led ably by Soka Gakkai's lay leaders, has grown considerably. Whereas it had only about 3,000 members in 1951, the number has risen to over 8 million by 2000. It has established schools, colleges, and a university, as well as cultural institutions. Academic study of this impressive growth attributes it to social responsibility, to the social aspect of Nichiren teachings, which, according to his present-day disciples, offers an alternative view of Japan, where this form of Buddhism would become the religious foundation of a peaceful and materially enriched society. It is interesting that Nichiren Buddhism had an interesting connection with India. One of its monks, the Nichidatu Fuji, who came to be revered in India and was called as Fuji Guruji. Fuji Guruji came and visited Mahatma Gandhi in his ashram in 1931 and spent some time with him. He got deeply impressed with Gandhiji's ideology and practice, and thereafter decided to spend the rest of his life promoting non-violence. And he then began to build peace pagodas in various parts of the world. The first one was built in Bombay in 1947. He later built one or two in Japan. I will end by quoting the Soka Gakkai's present leader, Daisaku Ikeda, who also is a great admirer of Mahatma Gandhi. He has lauded him thus: Buddhism's contribution is its discovery that it is ignorance that lies at the heart of the mutually enthralled unfolding of the individual and the world. Mahatma Gandhi worked tirelessly toward the conquest of that inner darkness. The fact that he used the term satyagraha to characterize his non-violent resistance is of great interest. His was a movement of social engagement, which at the same time embodied the philosophical struggle to overcome the negative inner forces that Buddhism describes as ignorance. In Gandhi's life, we can observe an absolute consistency. Between action and the philosophy between action and philosophy, spirit, and the body. I would like to point out here that I have been greatly fortunate and privileged to have had a close relationship with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Shreyas, with the Dalai Lama, This was mainly because after I retired, when I came back here, some of the Tibetan leaders based in Bangalore. Now, incidentally, Karnataka has the largest concentration of Tibetans in India. When they fled from Tibet, the government of India asked various state governments, even if they could provide land to them. So the Karnataka government was the most generous of all and gave them land in two places in Karnataka. One was in Bailakuppe and one was up in northern Karnataka. I don't quite remember the name at the moment. So every year when His Holiness the Buddha, or the Dalai Lama came to visit the settlement, I, as president of the Indo-Tibetan Friendship Association of South India, would go and meet him and spend time with him. And I became a great devotee of his, and I think he became fond of me. In fact, my second book on Gandhi, the Soul Force Warrior, the foreword to it has been written by him. I'm also very fortunate that when my first book, Gandhi's Outstanding Leadership, was being translated, was to be translated into Japanese. And I'm very grateful to our ambassador in Japan at that time. He put his cultural counselor on the line, who within a month found me Professor Pema Gyalpo, who in fact was the representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Japan, to translate that book. That book was translated by him within a fairly short period, within I think less than 3 months. And then he also found a publisher for it. And when it was published, again, I was greatly honored, thanks to our ambassador. He managed to get a princess of the imperial household, Princess Takamoto, to release the book. And the book was released at the Vivekananda Cultural Center of the Embassy of India in April of 2018. So I have had a close connection with Buddhism and with Japanese Buddhism. My first post in the Foreign Service was in Japan, and I fell in love with that country, and therefore I spent a lot of time studying about it and all that it had gone through. It has gone through great tragedies, but it has also gone through great refinement in every way. And of all the nations in the world, there's a famous book written about it by an American author called Ruth Benedict. It's called The Chrysanthemum and the Sword. And she makes the point that in no country in the world is there such a sharp contrast between two sides of the national sort of persona. One, which is the warrior ethic, which they have over a period of time also developed to a very, very high degree. And on the other is the creativity aspect. That's the other side. And in no other country, she says, will you find such a sharp contrast between the warrior ethic and the creator ethic, where both of them have been taken to such a high perfection and are so well balanced. I have a great admiration for that country. I pay tribute to its people. They are the most lovable people in the world, the most artistic, and sadly, people that have also suffered, the only people in the world that have had the tragedy of have to suffer an atom bomb being evaporated into smoke. In fact, that's one of the things I noticed when I went to Hiroshima. There is a Bank of Tokyo over there, and at the entrance you see I don't know whether you call it the shadow of a man. Someone was sitting there who was just evaporated, and not a trace of him was found. That bomb, the heat was so great that he just evaporated. That is the tragedy these people have suffered. That is why I think they're intrinsically such a deeply peace-loving people in the world today. Long may they live and much may they prosper. I thank all of you for your attention. I hope I have not exceeded my time.
Thank you, Ambassador Nazareth San. I now request President of Lotus and Chrysanthemum Trust, Professor Krishna Rao Jaisim, to please wrap up and for the benefit of those in the audience who have joined us late.
Gita-san, it is absolutely fascinating to listen to this phenomenal person, Nazareth-san, about the depth and culture of Japan and how LNC has made into the depths of the culture to such an extent the great relationship between India and Japan has opened many avenues. Nazareth-san, I'm deeply honored to have listened to this tremendous lecture and talk of yours, which opens my mind to many, many, many aspects and what I'll call infinity of space. I don't know what words to say, but I listened to it like a lecture and a talk like a young boy and an innocent student. Thank you very much, sir. Namaskars, Nazareth-san. Namaskars, Gita, for organizing this phenomenal meet. Thanks a lot. Namaskars to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Jaisim San. Adding to what you have just told, retired Ambassador Nazareth San dwelt deep into and gave us an insight into the spread of Buddhism to Japan, how it spread through the ancient Silk Route and the various important Buddhist temples that sprung up and were constructed during the centuries down the lane, and also Zen Buddhism as we know today. His broad spectrum of understanding includes politics, literature, art, history, and spirituality, and he explored the spin-off effects of Zen Buddhism, which generated a vast outpouring of artistic creativity in the form of calligraphy, painting, pottery, archmanship, swordmanship, archery, then gravel gardening, ikebana, and the other aspects, painting, which have shown the artistic creativity of the Zen Buddhism. From his talk, we get a perspective of the qualities of restraint and simplicity infused with a sublime quality. Finally, what he said, he ended up by saying that in all this creativity, the basic approach is that form is emptiness and emptiness form. So thank you so much, Ambassador Nazareth, for your insight. So as there are no questions in the chat box, I would request the participants to directly interact with the ambassador for any queries that you may be having.
Gita,
Yes, sir.
you might just mention that anyone who would like to have a text of this talk, I would be happy. And if they would send me their email, please give them my email. I'd be happy to send it to him along with the pictures that were shown with.
Shreyas, can you just type ambassador's email ID in the chat box for the benefit of those who would want to have a copy of this talk that he just now gave, please?
Yeah, it's PA Nazareth at gmail.com.
Yes. Thank you.
And we have a comment from Sushila B, Dr. Sushila B, who says, a deep insight has been dwelt with the rich heritage of Japan. Excellent presentation by Nazareth sir, and thank you, Geeta ma'am. So any comments on the YouTube? And
Yes.
also from Sakshi, who says, I would love to have, okay, so they would like to have a copy of this talk. So any comments from the YouTube, Shreyas?
Yes, ma'am.
Gita-san,
Yes. Please go ahead.
I raised my hand.
Yes.
Can I?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ambassador Nazareth, for giving us such a comprehensive Buddhist lecture. He covered almost everything from history to influence on Japanese people's life, including art and culture. I just wanted to tell you, as one Japanese audience, India is such a fascinating country for most Japanese people, partly because Buddha was born in India. And we have a feeling, very close feeling towards your country, India, because the philosophical path crossed with each other. And I'm wondering if in Hindu philosophy also, I heard you have a philosophy of karma. Karma is a very important concept in Buddhism, as you know, that previous life, the deeds are affecting our life. And in order to have a very good afterlife, we have to do, we are encouraged to do good things in the present life. So I'm wondering if you have a similar philosophy in Hindu. Thank you.
Yes, very much. It is very integral to Hinduism, the karma philosophy. Now, as far as Japan is concerned, as far as Buddhism is concerned, you find the karma much more in the Mahayana form of Buddhism rather than in the original Hinayana form of Buddhism. The Hinayana form of Buddhism is much more a social ethic. There is no theology in it. But in the latter form, the Mahayana Buddhism, a lot of the Hindu theology and ethic comes in. That is the main reason why Buddhism disappeared from India. It just got absorbed into Hinduism. After this was after the 7th century when Shankara, the great philosopher, came in and he sort of redefined Hinduism, gave it a firm basis. In fact, he restored Hinduism in India. Not many people know that for almost 1,000 years, from 300 BC, from the time of Ashoka, until the coming of Shankara in the 700 AD, the main religion in India was Buddhism. Of course, Hinduism was around, but the main religious edifice was that of Buddhism. Buddhist monasteries, Buddhist universities, the famous universities in Nalanda and Taxila. Everywhere it was Buddhism. It was only after the 7th century, 1,000 years after it was born, where Buddhism finally disappeared from India. It disappeared from India, but in many ways, it took over much of the rest of the world, most of it in Asia. But in later years, it has also spread to Europe and to the US, where there are sort of Buddhist schools, if not monasteries or Buddhist temples in various places. People are finding it. A lot of people, in fact, are giving up traditional Christianity and looking for new forms of religion and looking, for discovery of themselves through meditation. So Buddhism is impacting much on the modern world in this particular form. I hope I've answered your answer satisfactorily, Akiko-san.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Nazareth. And now that you mentioned the Soka Gakkai, I just want to mention that there are several thousand members of Soka Gakkai in India as well. And there's even a university, a women's college established by Soka Gakkai in India.
Yeah, and they are helping a lot of these students to complete their education. Yeah, they're doing very useful work. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Shreyas, read out the two messages in the YouTube.
Yes, ma'am. So we have messages of congratulation from Mr. Surendra Kumar says, congrats, very interesting and informative. And from Ms. Divya Rupa, who says, thank you so much for sharing such valuable information.
Please convey my respects to Yediyurappa here. Namaskar, sir. Go ahead.
Can Shreyas repeat who are the people on YouTube?
Mr. Surendra Kumar and Ms. Divya Rupa.
Acha, okay.
So they are from our Destination Heritage listeners, audience from there.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Geeta-san. Thank you so much, Jaisim-san. I'm honored that you made the overview remarks about the talk. And thank you for your kind and generous praise.
So thank you, Ambassador San. Thank you one and all for attending this session and for your presence. We meet again next month, maybe in the last week of October. Until then, good night and Shubharatri.
Thank you.
Namaskar, sir. Okay. All the best, sir.